very welcome to our panel discussion, What's the Deal, Pusher Man? As the title implies, we're talking about a very shady area of the modern music business. What's the deal? Pusher Man is, of course, the bloke in Superfly, that blaxploitation movie in the early 70s, I think, with a wonderful soundtrack from Curtis Mayfield. Although I have to admit that having looked into this whole field of digital music monetization, I get the impression it's less a kind of drug-dealing underworld in America. It's more like a gold rush where the people who get the money are not actually the people who find the gold, but the transport people, the taxis and courier who bring the gold to the shops. We have a very interesting panel here to discuss the various issues. To my right is, before I introduce Peter Jenner, of course, I should tell you that, as always, please switch all your handies off because the whole thing interferes with the interpreting machines. And that's the second thing. If you want to follow what's going on here in German, you can get the headphones from the back. There is instant interpreting being done. Peter Jenner, he studied economics at Cambridge, arrived as a lecturer at the London School of Economics before, I believe, the Beatles happened.
Maybe before they happened in Sweden.
He left after 4 years to manage Pink Floyd. He organized various free concerts as part of his work then, including the one of the Rolling Stones in Hyde Park. I believe he was not responsible for the dead butterflies. He has since... You were? Oh dear.
My fault. Partially.
He continued managing various people, including Roy Harper, the wonderful Robin Hitchcock, The Clash, Bob Marley, Billy Bragg, and as he told me a moment ago, the last few years, his main work has been to think about the future of the music business. Next, we have Andreas Rieser from Bern. He founded Mouthwatering Records in 2003. Bands like Filewile, Pressure Drop, Sofa Surfer are part of his empire. He will explain in detail a little more in a moment. We have Fabian Nickemeyer. He's a lawyer working for Suiza, our copyright agency in Switzerland. We have Shigeru Shix Amemiya. He founded a company called iMusician Digital, an indie online distributor in 2007. And last but not least, we have Oliver Heckmann. He is the VP of Engineering on Google YouTube. What exactly does that entail?
Yeah, so I'm based here in Zurich in the Hürlimann Areal, where we have our largest engineering center of Google outside the US. You might know or not know. As a VP of engineering working on YouTube, I'm responsible for all the tools that like our creators use, for example. I started almost 8 years ago, and one of the things I built 7 years ago when I was an engineer and not a VP is a system called Content ID. I'm pretty sure we'll be talking more about that later on. So that's a system we built here that deals with copyright infringement on YouTube. Today, I'm kind of responsible, as I said, for everything that creators need to upload their content to YouTube, to manage their videos online, to understand the analytics about their videos, where does their content watched, what keywords are people using to find my content, and so on, down to copyright management, revenue calculation, and so on.
Shix, would you please explain what iMusician Digital does and is?
So several years ago, we started an online digital music distribution where any musician could create an account, upload their music, and we would then distribute it to 200 stores. But since then, we've realized that the value is in the relationship to the musicians and the accuracy of the data And with the same data, we can then go to Suiza, register their music, go to Swiss Perform, register their music, collect their income, or put it onto Google Content ID, etc., etc. As long as you've got the full data set, reference data, you can do everything that you need in the online space with music.
In what way does this company differ from all the other people who distribute music on the internet?
I think distribution is a rapidly competitive space, but I don't think too many of these other competitors are really getting into the data, into the metadata business, which means really focusing on accurate metadata so that users, commercial users, that's iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, etc., can really identify all the rights holders in the music.
Could you, since you're using these words and I'm kind of a beginner in this field, could you explain to me what metadata are?
Metadata, you've got the audio, of course, the song that we hear, and then underneath it you have a lot of data which can be broken down into descriptive data and reference metadata. And the reference metadata are things that are absolute for every song. That's track artist, track song, track duration, and then the writers, the authors, the performers, etc. Descriptive metadata would be something like genre. You might call it hip-hop, I call it urban, and that's descriptive. But it's the data that goes with the song.
Mm-hmm. So every song that's downloaded anywhere or used in any way has all these data automatically in it?
Yes, not the complete set, but the more complete you make the set, the easier it is for licensors or commercial users of the music, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, to accurately identify the song and send the right royalties to the right people.
Fabian, I presume your job with Suiza is to make sure that everybody includes the right metadata and chase them for their payments. Is that?
Yeah, well, our main effort is to hunt everybody down who uses our music. No, we pretty much we used to pretty much rely on the metadata that was given to us by the users, and as Shix pointed out, the metadata is the data of the content is one of the main problems, and it's very difficult for us to identify and to distribute money if the data is not correct.
How can you reinforce the idea that people give you the right metadata?
Well, basically, they need to have it themselves. I mean, we are representing the authors, so the authors are the people that wrote the underlying work to a recording. So if you want to publish or distribute any song, you need a recording of that song. And within that song, there should be name of the song, name of the performer, an ISRC code if possible. And with this data, we can then identify the underlying work.
Andreas, could you please describe the model of your business?
So basically, when I started my label, that was in 2003, and I started it because of my own band. So I wanted to do everything by our own, and my band was called Filewire at that time. And we were maybe the first one who had free download on the internet and a video clip shown in VEVO. So we said, you can have it. And we tried to invent a PayPal system on our internet site, but basically nobody had PayPal at that time, so we didn't solve anything. But we had a huge amount of download that time. So, and that's why I started my label and started with other bands. And right now I'm doing a lot of management and publishing, and the sales is maybe like that from my full income.
So the publishing and the management pays your wages, basically?
Try to, yeah.
Mm. Is the income from the music so low because the distribution of the monies is so bad, or does just nobody pay for it?
The problem is that you have to get huge amounts of plays that you get money, and if you're a little independent label, right now it's not working. So, but maybe in the future it's gonna work.
Are you optimistic?
I'm pretty optimistic, yes. Of course I am. I have to. I mean, what can I do?
Get a proper job.
Exactly.
Peter, the last time we had the pleasure to have you here in Zurich for m4music was exactly 7 years ago when you gave a keynote speech about your basic idea of a flat rate, I believe, some kind of levy to be paid by people who use gadgets that you can download music with. What's the latest on the sort of concept of subscription and flat rate?
Well, I can only say it hasn't got very far, but on the other hand, everything else has not got very far either. So I guess we're still really much in the same place as we were 7 years ago on that one. I just want to say one other couple of things. Wells Fargo is the answer to your whole question about the gold rush. The only corporation, I think, that survived from the gold rush in 1848 in America on the West Coast is Wells Fargo. And they are a bank. And that's why they survived. They realized that being a stagecoach company was not a very good idea compared with being the people who looked after the gold. And in a sense, I think that's a great lesson for us all, you know. In the digital thing, who or what is the Wells Fargo? What will survive from that whole change in the business structure that we've got going on? So I always think that it's a good idea to remember Wells Fargo. And I think one other thing I would like to say is that, which came up from someone, was if we don't have data, you won't get paid. So the whole question is, why is metadata important? It's because if you don't have it, you won't get paid. And if there's one thing I would say to any artist, every artist, is if you make a recording, keep a very good record of who played what, who wrote what, and sign off on it and agree on it, because sometime, if you ever want to get paid, you're going to need that piece of paper. If anyone's going to use your music, use your recording, and want to pay you, if you don't have that bit of paper, you're going to have a hard job getting paid. And so the no data, no pay.
You said that not much has happened with the subscription idea, but then that not much has happened in anywhere else in this sort of field. Could you sort of describe the not much that has happened?
Well, I think that what's happened is that 7 years ago, where were we? It was probably sort of early iTunes, and that was going to be, it was all about downloads, and people thought that was just going to be the answer. And then along comes Spotify and Google and YouTube and various other things, which have led to a collapse in the unit price of music. The unit price at the margin for music is very, very low. And so that the amount of money that's coming through on these new services is minuscule. It's tiny. And somehow or another, we have to address this problem as to how we're going to deal with it. And I mean, I have to say that as far as I can see, the major problem is the major record companies. The major record companies are basically stealing the money and not passing it through to either the publishers or to the artists. Now, I'm sure they would disagree with that description, and I'm sure I shall get arrested for libel as I leave this room. But there is no way that the current system, where basically most artists get paid on their old-fashioned or on an old-fashioned analog royalty basis for the use of their music on streaming services. And this is really unacceptable. And in the same way also, that the services invariably have to get licenses for the music, and then when they have to realize they've got to sort out the publishers, then they have to sort out the big publishers, and then finally they get round to the small publishers and the small people and the performance rights. There's no money left. So I think the collection societies are having a very hard time. The big corporate publishers are trying to follow what the example of the major record companies, which is to get as much money up front as you possibly can with as little information as possible, so you are unfortunately forced to put it all in your own bank account. This is a terrible fate, but it's something which we have to live with. And I think we have real huge problems about fairly bringing through the money which is being made from the use of music through to the people who create the music and who write the music. And I don't blame these services. The services have to get the licenses they have to get in order to do their business. I think we have to change the way we license music. I think we have to, and I have to say, I think that the idea of charging on the broadband is still a very good idea. And looking on the use of music online as being more like radio than a traditional retail sale is where we should be going. When you start thinking in those terms, you start thinking about 50-50. 50% to the writers, 50% to the publisher, 50% to the performers, 50% to the record companies. That seems to me as a sort of deal which could make sense. And at the moment what's happening is that over to the record companies, and then whatever is left, what they feel like paying through to the performers, they pay through. And that's not acceptable.
What?
Be careful, they'll arrest you too.
I would like to mention something is what we see at the moment as well is a great deal of cherry picking by major publishers. All the great deals which we can do with little effort, license great sums, that is being done by themselves. They took that repertoire from the Author Society, and as soon as it's the little stuff where you have to have a lot of effort, a lot of dealing with just small sums, that they still gave to the Author Societies, and basically that is on the back of the authors that write again the songs for these publishers.
I think there's one really important issue that we have to be aware of, and I don't think that often people aren't aware of it. It's the black box, that the major. When music can't be, when you don't know what to do with the money, you put it into an account. And on the whole, those accounts rely, they consist of people who don't have the information, or the information is conflicting or it's not clear. You don't know who owns the record, who the people are, and whatever. And the black box tends then to be divided according to market share. And market share means it mainly goes to the big boys, to the big record companies or the big publishers. They are also the people whom the services have to license first to have a chance of doing their business. So they are the big guys on the game. One of their main jobs is to maximize the black box, because the black box goes straight to the bottom line. They don't have to pay anyone else, they don't have to pay any performers, they don't have to pay any writers. The less information there is, the better. And I think one of the reasons, we're meant to be here talking about information and data, and I think one of the problems with the data is that in some senses, that they know they've got to get the data together in the long run, but in the short run, the less information there is, the better. And this is a sort of contradiction, and this is a real problem. I think this applies to the publishers, the big publishers, as well as the big labels.
Can I just ask a practical question? Black box sounds like something from a conspiracy theory. Who controls the black box, and who profits from the money that's sitting there and accruing interest?
Well, the black box is actually a perfectly legitimate thing. It's if you've got some money and you don't know who all the names of all the people and all the songs that are used and all the rest of it, or there's a confusion, you don't know whether you've got the name right or whatever it is, or this might be so-and-so, it might be so. It's a sort of reserve account.
Is it a neutral body that controls it? Or
no.
Is it...
Well, it's controlled by the societies. Everybody has a black box. All the societies have black boxes.
Well, in the digital age, it would be with the DSP. because
DSP being?
the digital service provider.
Oh, they have their black boxes.
They
as
have the
well.
black box, and as soon as the conflicts are being dealt with, they distribute that money. Some of them do. Some accept, for example, market share solutions. Others, for example, say, well, as long as you guys can't get a hold of your problems, we're not distributing at all.
Right.
Can I just maybe
Please
draw
do.
one conclusion? You said at the beginning how metadata is important. That's why everybody in the audience should be so careful about their metadata and maintain it, because that minimizes the risk that your works end up in the black box.
Exactly.
That's the conclusion to your beginning.
Thank you for making that clear for me. Right.
Some guy from your company, Tom Pickett, apparently at Midem, said that YouTube had paid $1 billion to the music industry in the last few years. He didn't make it quite clear. I mean, did this $1 billion go straight to the black box, or how was this distributed?
No, I mean, the money goes to the labels and to the publishers, or in countries with collection societies, to the collection societies. The last 2 years, so that was 1 billion over the last couple of years. In the last 2 years, it was over $500 million of that. Everything, internet business is growing exponentially, so it's very much skewed towards the more recent years.
Later in the year, is that still the plan to open the premium pay YouTube site?
There were some leaks about that. We're only talking about new products when they're ready, so I can't comment anything here.
Can I just pop in with something which I heard recently, which I think is probably relevant to this discussion, but I couldn't say that it is. But I have a very good friend who used to be the business affairs guy at Elektra Records in America. And when MTV came along, they did a deal with MTV. They got a deal. They said, look, you can have all our content, all the videos that we have. You can have them, you can use them. You won't have to pay us. But you will have to give us $5 million a year for the ability to get to our content. That money is non-attributable. None of that money goes to the artists. None of that money probably goes to the publishers. And it's those sorts of deals are probably being made right now with the digital services, where it says, we will let you use all our material, give us loads of money, and that is certainly one of the problems which is going on. And that has got to its worst with, I think, in some ways, with Spotify, where not only does that go on, but they've actually got equity in the company. That the major labels have equity in Spotify, and they also get all sorts of front money up front, which disappears and can't really be attributed to anything, and all the rest of it. And I think that the companies like Google have to do the deals that they have to do to get the content. They can't come to my artists, our artists, and say, can you give us? They have to go and get all the music. They have to get the big stuff. They have to deal with Universal. They have to deal with Sony and all the rest of it. And that's what they've got to do. And they have to pay what those guys require, because if those guys do not give them that content, access to that content, they can't open their business. The businesses will not work.
You know what? I think that's why finally with Google and Google Content ID, it's the first time there's a voice of reason and a flash of sanity in this madness, this last decade of madness, because finally we have a player in the room which is bigger than the majors by a considerable amount. And if Universal doesn't want to put their content up, then users will put it up. And if they want to block, then it will be to their disadvantage. So that is the game changer with Google. That's why I'd love it if you came up to me after the meeting and bought my company, but I am a big fan of Google, and that is because they are the elephant in the room. They're bigger than the majors, they're bigger than collection societies, and their vision of the future and digital media is, I think, is correct. It harnesses all the mechanisms and laws of a digital marketplace, and I think they've got it right, and they're bigger than the majors and the collection societies, and they'll drag them into the 21st century kicking and screaming.
But I think we'll also have to drag Google into the 21st century. There's a deal has to be done. Because the thing the record companies and the publishers and the collection societies hate about Google, there is a vitriolic hatred. They have to work with each other, but they hate each other.
Because they don't have control. They don't have control of Google.
Yeah,
and
no, but
that's
it's worse
why.
than that, because what Google does is that on their search, if you look up Billy Bragg MP3, the top searches will always be to non-paying sites. And that is always the problem, and that is a huge problem for the record companies. And if I was Google, I would hold it, because that's their big leverage on the record companies, is to whether they'll ever give that away. If they give that away, if they say we won't do that anymore, then in a way, the record companies have got them. I mean, it's a power play going on between Google and the record companies, and it's a real big problem. If people think they don't have to pay, if they can get all the music without paying, that's a huge problem for those of us who want to get paid, and artists who want to get paid, writers who want to get paid. And, you know, Google is not an innocent, shining creature. They have many good things. I mean, YouTube is great. Their distribution of advertising revenue, in principle, is great. Their access to illegal sites is bad. And it's put a pressure on all the prices throughout the whole system. It's a huge negative pressure. And in a way also, YouTube, from the point of view of most performers and writers don't get anything out of YouTube, because the money is very small unless you're a huge hit. In the future, it will grow, and it's early days and all the rest of it. I'm not negative about it, but we have a huge problem. We've got a huge pressure down on the price. The unit price of a piece of music online is virtually zero.
You know what?
Yeah, maybe there were many things that kind of affected Google and YouTube. Let me try to maybe address some of the things said, and maybe clarify some things for the audience, because we made some assumptions I'm pretty sure most people didn't understand. Maybe first the content ID thing that you mentioned. So there's a system, it's called Content ID, and if a rights owner gives us a reference file, that could be a sound recording or a video, then there's a massive system that is like technically insanely complex, that is running over every video that gets uploaded on YouTube and every video that has ever been uploaded in the history of mankind to YouTube, and tries to find that piece of content in all those videos. Right now, we see over 100 hours of new content uploaded every minute. So we're looking through that, every single 100 hours that get uploaded every minute, for those millions of reference files that we have, which include the vast majority of music that exists. That means we can identify which piece of music is in a user-uploaded file. And the rights owner, as he's using that system, has basically control over what should happen to that video. He could say, someone obviously uploaded their, I don't know, the video of their firstborn baby, and they used an artist that I'm representing to underline that with music. That's piracy, that should be blocked. That's a legally probably valid statement, so they could kind of use that system to block that. Over the last couple of years, as I said, I'm working on that since 7 years, so I've seen that, see the industry change. Most of the music labels have actually turned it around and started to embrace that by saying, hey, it's actually good if someone uses my music. There was a recent statement, if you Google for, or use any search engine for Universal Music Group, Francis Keeling, the head of their digital business globally, he recently said, this money that we are making on YouTube from users, normal users, fans of our music, putting our music on their videos and uploading them to YouTube, has grown faster and is now bigger than the money we're making from our official music videos. So that's a business that only exists because we built a system originally actually for keeping that stuff off the site. It just got then used to turn that around and use it to actually monetize that content. The next interesting thing, the topic of data will probably come up more frequently. There's one thing that I noticed, which is a bit of a shame because most people are not aware of that feature, and that's a big miss. And that is, we have a tool that's called YouTube Analytics. So if you are a musician and you have your content on YouTube, you can actually access, and now that's addressing the transparency thing that Peter said. If you uploaded your videos to the site, or if you're using Content ID and we kind of find your content in other videos that someone else uploaded, you actually have free analytics. You know how often that video got watched. You know in which country it gets viewed. You even know other advanced stuff, like how much of the video are they watching? Are they dropping off in the middle? Maybe then the second half of my music is not as exciting as the first half. Or what keywords do they use to find my song? Maybe do they search for me as an artist? Do they search for the song specifically? Do they search for, I don't know, funny cats and then just happen to stumble across my video by accident? All of that information is kind of available since many, many years. It could create a lot more transparency in the system. It's always a bit depressing for me as someone who's worked on that to see that it doesn't get the usage it kind of deserves.
But that would be a question from me, because how big do you have to be to get, for example, access to the Content ID? Because that's always...
Yeah, everybody has access to analytics. Content ID is a system where you can cause kind of literally hundreds of millions of dollars of damage if you block videos where you don't have a right. And by the nature of that Content ID, we're only giving to kind of rights owners that we can actually sign a contract, meet in person, and give them the proper training. There are about 6,500 rights owners in the world that are using Content ID.
Pardon, how many?
6,500.
Okay, because I'm just thinking about how can the small artist, how can he actually monetize his video if he doesn't even recognize, if his recording will not be recognized in other videos? I mean, he somehow has to get access to that Content ID to upload it so that he can get monetization out of that.
But that's why companies like iMusician. That's why companies like iMusician offer the service, because basically there's a massive information gap between professional industry and musicians. It's a little bit, in our business we say it's like, we use...
So that's just, so with other words, there's just a new player in the game as well?
In the middle. It's in the same way that most of us use an accountant between us and the taxman. We could go to the taxman directly, we could do our tax returns directly, etc., but most of us would rather use our heads to do something more productive, like create music, and pay a professional to do all that number crunching stuff.
So basically you are the modern Wells Fargo. You had...
Do you agree? If Peter says so, yeah.
Can I just ask you, in your biography it says you had a sort of a David and Goliath situation with IFPI, the International Phonographic sort of Association. What went on there, and why do they not like you?
It's not really relevant to this story, but they blocked iMusician from the charts. We have a lot, probably, I don't know. We have hundreds of musicians who are in the Swiss charts. Of course, we're not a part of IFPI. IFPI pays for the Swiss charts. We don't contribute a cent towards the compilation and manufacturing of the charts, etc. And we were simply getting too many artists in the charts.
Well, it is relevant to this discussion because we're talking about, access for everybody to this big global music play thing, and clearly some people are more equal than others.
But
yes,
I think there's another big problem. Peter was talking about free music, and I mean, in the 90s I bought maybe 2 or 3 CDs a month. That's a lot. And if I calculate how many money I have to spend, that I have the possibility to consume the music every month, it's a lot more. So everybody is paying a lot more every month that he can consume the music, which is completely...
You mean with Spotify or with what?
He's paying mobile phone companies, he's paying internet providers, etc., etc.
What Andy's talking about is in Switzerland today, I think the average Swiss person spends less than 15 francs per year on recorded music. And despite what you said, about where recording income is going. I, for one, went from spending less than 15 francs a year on recorded music to spending 15 francs a month with Spotify Premium. So that's 15 times 12, which is 180 francs. And so that's a massive accomplishment, I think. The problem with Spotify is that it's a business model which only scales, only works if it scales, which means that 20, 30, 40% of the population in Switzerland uses diese and Spotify. But I agree with you. The income from recordings is going down, and I put it to you that it's going to go down even further.
Yeah, but why I pay so many money every month that I just can consume the music, and I pay a lot more than I paid in the 90s when the music industry was top. It doesn't make sense. So maybe we have to get the money from the mobile companies, from the internet providers, etc., etc. That's where the money is.
I mean, basically.
Or maybe the music industry has to come up with better services which consumers want to buy, because they've got more disposable income than ever, but they just don't want to spend it on music.
The problem is that you know that the thing is, I was reading in the paper today that the total number of paid subscriptions to Spotify, which is the biggest of the worldwide services, is something that's under 10 million, paying $10 a month, under 10 million. I mean, this is worldwide, and I think they've got a multiple of that watching it free, and I think this is the real problem. We have a real problem again when we're talking about your service and your what do you call them, the people who can come in, your 6,500. What are they called? Your content.
The partners.
Your partners.
The 90 partners.
Yeah. Now the point is, if I'm a musician, I cannot get access to those numbers. I do not know what my label is collecting from you. I have no access to that information unless I own the music. If I've done a deal with a record company, I cannot get that information unless I'm also the label owner and all the rest of it. And so I think there's a very real problem.
Yeah, but that very much depends on whatever contract you have
No,
with
it
the
doesn't.
label.
The contracts, you cannot negotiate those contracts. The contracts are fixed. They're also historical, and you're dealing with David and Goliath doesn't enter into it.
But for small musicians, you do have to probably use a service like iMusician. We deliver content into Google Content ID. So you probably do have to use a middleman like we do, who has the professional knowledge to use it responsibly. Theoretically, the whole point with giving Content ID to the public is that a 15-year-old could upload Lady Gaga.
No, I'm not arguing about Content ID. The problem is the people you pay are then the people who are responsible to pay the artists and the writers. And the problem is that they will not tell you what they're getting from you. You are not allowed to tell the writer or the performer what you're paying to the label for the use of their music, and that's all surrounded with NDAs, so no one knows what's going on.
That's not really true.
And the net position that's going down is that there is still an enormous amount of free music online, and we haven't yet solved a situation where we can collectively find a reasonable, I think this position is absolutely right. This is why I got my famous £1 a month. It's because if you start getting money from the distributors and it's distributed through the collection society so that both the performers and the writers have some content in it, we might find that we get to a better situation where there'll be a lot less bitching and moaning. And I think that way the record companies can get paid, but they can't steal all the performers' money, and the same with the publishers and the record and the writers. I do think we have to find a way where the total amount of revenue that's going through the system, which is being generated by people accessing music, and that includes the advertising on Google, it includes the access charge, the fees you pay for your broadband, for your mobile phones. There is a lot of money being made, and what is happening is that we have not got a solution whereby the people who create the music get properly paid. And that is the challenge, and it's a huge
That is the challenge.
nightmare challenge.
And you know, the interesting part here is that in Switzerland, for example, we have exactly that system whenever it comes down to discotheques, whenever it comes down to concerts, whenever it comes down to private copy levy, we have exactly that system. That the user, the end user, he pays a collective management organization, and they will distribute the money directly to the people who created the content. But in Switzerland, as in the same with the rest of Europe, that doesn't work online. Why? Nobody could explain. But you could do the same thing and say, okay, let's do it for online as well. It would make everything easier because YouTube would not have to negotiate with 38 different partners, which they have to do now in Switzerland. And that's just the publishing. We're not into the record companies yet. Yeah. With the other system, they'd have 2 partners to do a deal with in Switzerland, and they'd have the music pretty much worldwide here for Switzerland.
This is maybe the moment to mention global repertoire database, which perhaps Fabian can explain what it is, because before we came down here, obviously we had a conversation upstairs, and it was the cause of much disagreement. So firstly, what is the GRD, which seems to be incredibly important, and secondly, what's the disputes involved? Can you explain what it is, please?
Well, the GRD is the acronym for Global Repertoire Database. Don't ask me why, but in music business, everything is acronyms. So what they basically plan to do, not just for the music business, but for all of the copyrights, is to put all the data into one system so that the data can be accessed from everywhere and the metadata is correct in that system. If I'm correct, the whole thing was initialized by PRS and STIM, which is the PRS is the Performing Rights Society in England and Great Britain, and STIM is pretty much Suiza in Sweden.
So I believe, Shix, you quite like the system, and Peter, you think it's shit.
It is.
But it sounds like a good idea.
The idea is brilliant.
It is the data age. Data is the oil in the machine. In order for music to flow through the internet, digital media only works if the data is accurate. If the data is accurate, that means anyone who touches the music knows who to pay. They can license music on the fly.
I don't disagree with that at all. My only problem with GRD, and it's a practical problem, which is that it doesn't work, and it's not going to work.
And my argument is that
I hope it works. I would love it to work, but I see every indication that it is not working and will not work.
Why not?
See, you have one
One second. Why not?
Why not? Basically because I think you're trying to find in a central one place, you're trying to get a snapshot which will last. And the thing is that you're taking a snapshot of a moving pattern, and everything is moving all the time. And I think it's too rigid. It's a rigid structure. It's trying to they say they want to give the authoritative data. And I think that is something which cannot be found and does not exist. And that in a sense you've got to be more mobile with it and and work on a more national basis because of issues with sub-publishers and contracts running out and data of this sort. That, I mean, the thing is that to try and get that all in one central place, I think is a prescription for disaster. So my objection to GRD is not the idea, it's whether it's a practical solution, and every indication is that it's not a practical solution, partly for lots of internal political reasons within the music industry.
Thank you, Peter. Everything in life is a process, and even if the GRD goes down next year, then somebody is going to try to do it again the year after. The fact is, it has to be done.
I agree.
And so, if this version of the GRD has to fail in order for the next one to start, then that is the process that we have to go through to get to a better tomorrow. By the time you will be dead and you don't care. But in 50 years, we need a better system where data is catalogued online and is accurate so that all the performers can get paid.
You see, I think we all agree on that. But the problem is not the develop part. It's like in IT, you develop and then you run the system. And the problem with the GRD is not to develop it. The problem is to run it. I mean, if you have a song with 10 different authors, and each of these 10 authors has a different publisher. Now, each of these 10 publishers will have a different sub-publisher in every country again. Now, we're up to 30 people or companies, and that's just the copyright in the song. Now we go to the recording side, where we have record labels with different distribution channels and catalogs from sub-publishers. You can all do that, you know, like a picture. That's the moment. But tomorrow, the first catalog will be sold from one sub-publisher to the other, and the day after that, the next one. And that is the moment where the system, well, I doubt.
And that example you just made also demonstrates the inefficiencies in the music industry.
Yes.
Like all of these 30 companies involved in that single thing have at least one lawyer that also needs to get paid besides the musicians and the writers. I have the luxury of like at YouTube working with like many different industries, from news. I work intensively with Hollywood, with sports, with gaming, which is a pleasure, and with music. And I have to say, from all the industries I've worked with in the last 8 years, the inefficiencies, the amount of fragmentation, the amount of intransparency, the amount of distrust between the different parties that should actually be working together for the sake of the artist and the consumer. That beats every other industry, and by a factor of 10.
And what I like about the place where we are today, historically, it is that we are at a tipping point where we have a chance to throw out all that bullshit, leave all the dickheads behind, and create something new.
Well, I think we have a real problem. We have a real problem. And one of our real problems is that the copyright life is so long. So that we are dealing with a situation where we've got copyright lasts in a recording from 70 years after it's released. For the song, it's 70 years after the death of the last writer. I mean, this is craziness. I really do think we have to have some serious thinking. I totally agree. We've got to rebuild. GRD, I totally agree with everything you said about it. I think the GRD will go down. We have got to build it up again in some way or another. But I do think we've got to find a way. And what really annoys me is that we do have a solution which has worked, and that is for radio. Radio, it worked. You could, once the government had said you could have a radio station, you just had to go to Swiss Perform and Suiza, and you got a license, and you could get on with your business.
Yeah,
and you would love that, wouldn't you?
It would be much better than today, but I would wish us to be even like far better than that, because that is still fragmented by region, or in the best case by country.
If we got the cooperation properly done, so that we did, and this is back to your data set, we got our data sorted out, so that if I licensed it in the UK to a service, it would be legal throughout Europe, and that should be the system that we should work, and indeed throughout the world. The idea that we have to license every different type, shade of a recording in every different country is crazy.
Yeah.
We've got to be in a position, if we want to benefit from the new technology, we've got to be able to deliver a price for music. Not a price for this bit of music or that bit of music, but a price for music, so people can build businesses knowing how much music costs.
One more, I'm afraid time is racing. Before we go on to all your future visions very quickly, and then questions from the audience. What would you like to say, Fabian?
I just wanted to mention, the structure of the music business indeed is extremely difficult, and as you said, quite intransparent, because nobody knows where catalogs go and so on and so forth. That's why a centralized place where you can get all the licenses out of one hand is a perfect place. And in Switzerland, we have that, except for the online world. In the rest of in the offline world, we do have that. And the other thing is, you both are from the digital world, but and what you forget in this moment is that the traditional system in the offline world will continue to exist, and that's what makes it so difficult to break that system in the online world. That's the main problem.
Okay, can I have one more question to you, Oliver,
Yes,
which is really burning on my tongue, which is, you've had a long-standing dispute with GEMA, the German version of Suiza, which I find really intriguing.
That's the most frequent question that I typically get at
Sorry?
these events. That's the most frequent question
I'm
think
sure
about.
it is, but it is an interesting question because apparently GEMA wanted 0.375 cents per stream, which YouTube thinks is too much, which just seems a bit steep from a company that's made $13 billion profit last year. Wouldn't it be nice to share out a little more to the German copyright owners?
You're touching on multiple things here. Maybe the short statement in the interest of time. I mean, GEMA is not the only we're talking to a ton of collection societies. We have deals in place with many collection societies in the whole world. The collection society deals that we have in place cover 129 different countries. It seems to work everywhere. We have a deal with Suiza, we have a deal in Austria, we have a deal in France, Netherlands, Belgium, Bulgaria, Poland, Italy, Spain, and countries that are very similar to that. GEMA is the only one that we're having a problem with. So, as you can see from the number of deals that we have in place, we are very well aware that we need to pay the authors who are writing good songs that can get uploaded to YouTube and that generate traffic for us. We have this deal in place. There's only a single country where we had a problem signing them. There are like 129 other countries where that hasn't been.
Sorry, you're not answering the question. The question was why you don't pay more.
The reason why I can't, the deal is not as much a question of the per unit price than you make it seem.
Yes, I mean, I think
much more complicated than that. You can't tie it down
yes.
to, it's not a money thing.
I mean, I think that it's I'm here. I'm absolutely on your side. I think that what's happening with GEMA is I suspect that they are being driven by the old-fashioned business model where we're in demand, and you can't do that online. It's totally impractical to do it on per stream. You can accumulate the streams, and then you can have some sort of revenue shares and all the rest of it. But it's a real problem, which. I think that many of the publishers, and I suspect especially in Germany, do not understand the digital world in any way whatsoever. And they just say, we are going to hold for our old business. And meanwhile, the longer we can hold you at bay, the more money we will make from our old business. So we can, what they are is they're King Canute. They're trying to hold the digital tide at bay, and it won't work. In the end, they're going to have to give in and take something which relates to the revenue which is generated by the service, which is what they do everywhere else.
Okay.
I mean, the basic model is, the model that we have is a model of collaboration, where we show ads, we make revenue from those ads, and we share that revenue with the rights owners. And that's a revenue sharing model where we share more than 50% of the money that we make, we give to the content owners. And that's a model where incentives are aligned, because now we have the incentive to maximize that, because that maximizes the revenue that we get to keep, as well as maximizes the revenue that we pay out. That's the model that we're following very successfully.
I think what would make life much easier for all of us is if you would also take some of the revenue you get from illegal sites and
We're not
put
getting
that.
Any revenue from.
Oh yes, you are from sites which don't pay proper royalties, and shove some of that money over to the record industry, and life would be much easier for you. I do think that's. They are on ad sites on Google. It's not YouTube. I know that YouTube and Google are not quite the same, although Google owns YouTube, and there is a real problem there. And I think that would really help you in all sorts of ways, is to sort that out. And I don't know whether it's what the reasons are, but I mean, I know they're very complex, and it's lots and lots of stuff, and it's probably a lot more to do with negotiating position with the record companies in the long run than it is to do with anything else. But let's not go further on there.
Okay.
Unless you want to.
Maybe just one last number. I won't comment on the piracy, but I disagree with that, because we're not making money off that. Just one number at the end.
Advertising on that stuff. People go
We should advertisers that are not supposed. they get shut down quicker than they come back. Just one number that is I think, a sign of how the industry has changed. You all know Psy, I assume, K-pop with Gangnam Style was his breakthrough hit. That video has been viewed on YouTube over 1.7 billion times. In German, über 1,75 Milliarden Mal. That's kind of numbers we're talking about today in the streaming world. As you kind of all know, that's about a factor of 100 to 1,000 more than you could have probably ever dreamed of selling in the old world.
Okay,
But, I mean,
before,
that's
sorry, we really do have to come to the questions, but we also promised in the program that we'll have a quick go at speculating about the future. So could each one of you please, in 2.5 sentences, tell us how you envisage your business to be, where it will stand in, say, 5 years, 10 years' time? Oliver.
For someone in computer science, 5 to 10 years is always like, that's really far out, given it's moving so fast. Music is among the most popular content on YouTube. So if I zoom in on YouTube, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to try further innovations in the music space, consuming music. We've talked a lot about creation and making money of it and kind of worrying about not having any money. What we haven't talked about is actually those people that in the end have to pay, all of us here, and that's the people who consume music. I'm very, very passionate and very confident, like, music consumption will be much more pleasure in 5 years than it is today.
Shix,
Um,
where you want to be?
Prognosis. I put it to you that within a few years, the revenue from recordings is going to continue to drop. To drop. If you look at the laws of a free market economy and infinite supply of one song, it dictates that prices will continue to drop. And Spotify are trying to make things work. I said that I went from spending $20 a year to 180, but the flaw in their thinking is that they will never get critical mass, everyone using Spotify. And the biggest torpedo in Spotify is YouTube. YouTube is quickly becoming the most streamed music service, and they are free, cheaper, better, quicker, more convenient. Regarding recording revenue, I personally believe that it should be protected by copyright societies. That's my prognosis, and that's what I think.
Fabian?
Well, I'm sitting here wearing two skins. On the one hand side, I'm working as an attorney for Suiza. On the other hand, I am a member of Suiza as a composer. And in both skins, I hope that author societies are being strengthened. Why? I think it makes things easier for the users because they only have one partner to deal with. And as a member, it's basically the question, whom am I going to trust? Is it either a multinational money-making company or a cooperative society that works in my name and in which I have a vote and I can work with? And that's why I believe and I hope that author societies will be strengthened, and that will solve a lot of the fragmentation problems that we have today.
Andreas?
The only society I trust is the copyright society. That's the one. It seems to work, and I trust what they're doing, and they tell me what they are doing.
And they're getting you the money that, say, you get for those 5 plays you have in America on some local radio station?
They try to, but they maybe America is a bad example. But I get the 5 plays from Germany or from the UK or from France. America is another story.
Okay, well, they keep it all for
but
themselves.
I would love to get some money from the mobile companies or from the broadcasting companies because they have the biggest piece of the cake. And it's not, and yeah, that's very important. And I think that's where the money is. I even don't think that the money is on the streaming services, or they share the money. Google maybe share the money, but the broadcast, I say like internet providers, mobile phone companies, all the companies who provides the access to the music, they don't
How
pay.
do you think this can be changed?
Maybe government.
Right. Peter, your finally your vision.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what the problem that we have, the music industry is the canary in the mine. I mean, what's happening to us is going to happen increasingly has happened or will happen or will increasingly happen to newspapers, to books, to films, to TV, and all the other creative media. And if we want those things to survive, we've got to have people who are getting money from it. And that is the challenge. How do we find a way which says, okay, you can access this stuff, because we can't make people pay at the point. It's, you know, the internet, it makes it very hard for you to get people to pay at the point. But there is someone that you do have to pay, and that is your broadband provider, your mobile phone company, and so on. And I think we should be looking at the example of the electricity industry. You know, if you want to get electricity in your house, you have to pay a standing charge. If you then use a lot of electricity, you pay more. And somehow or another, I think that sort of, or a combination of that and bundling. You know, you want to bundle, if you get a TV service, you get a whole load of services, some of which you watch and some of which you don't. And it's that combination of sort of bundling and standing charges and usage charges, because they know what's going through the pipes. They know what's going through the pipes. We could get paid. And then on top of that, there'll be services like YouTube, which are driven by advertising. I think there'll be a lot more advertising-driven services. And I think we have to get to transparency, and we have to, which means going at the NDAs, those non-disclosure agreements. We all have to feel more relaxed about what's going on, because one of the problems, which is a big problem, is mutual suspicion. There's a huge amount of mutual suspicion, and we need to provide the people who delivering the music to the public with a price for music, and they have to then get it from their customers. People aren't getting broadband subscriptions just to do emails. They're getting broadband so they can access content. And that has to be faced up to by governments if they want those creative industries to survive, because otherwise we're all in shit. And that, in the end of the day, is also going to be a problem for YouTube. You know, they may have kids making things, but are they going to be playing the Beatles for the rest of the next 50 years in the background to their videos of their cats? You know.
Right, well, thank you very much, but we would like some questions from the floor. Reto is there with a microphone if you want to hold up your hand, and he'll race towards you.
Sorry for my English, it's not that good. A question to YouTube. I see more and more advertising on the YouTube clips, and I see more and more content that is not clear who is the owner of this content, and you see advertising there, and YouTube starts with no advertising, and now it comes very subversive, slowly more and more, and I see now advertising that I can't skip. And two questions: who gets the money for this advertising that is not clear? Who is the owner of the rights? And will Google be in the future more and more in the advertising business like TV? I mean, it's very progressive.
Yeah. So the first question first, like when you see advertisement on a YouTube video and you see the video was uploaded by something that doesn't sound like the very official owner of that content, that's exactly the content ID system that's behind that I mentioned earlier. So let's say you see the clip of a Batman movie, or you see someone shares a baby video with you that has music on it, you would typically see you could see advertisement on those videos. That's because the content ID system has identified that, I don't know, Sony Music is the owner of the song playing in the background, and Sony Music has given us the mission to kind of monetize that song. that's when you see advertisement on YouTube. That also means that more than 50% of the money made by advertisement on that video would, in that case, go to Sony. The second question you ask, we follow the user. We look at the user. One thing we are really passionate about is just making the user experience on YouTube in the best possible way. So we will be kind of following, but we also understand that in order for users to be on the platform and consume good content, that the creators needs to be paid so that they can actually make enough money so that they produce more content for the user. This is going relatively well on YouTube. I mean, you all see those stories. We had an event this week in our office where we invited some Swiss creators, and it's good to see that a lot of them have kind of now built an audience in just 1 year. We only launched in Switzerland a year ago, pretty exactly a year ago. Within that year, they've managed to build an international audience, and many of them don't have to work anymore except for creating videos on YouTube. To monetize that, we will be doing everything that users want to see. Right now, the most promising avenue for us is showing advertisement. That has the advantage for the user in, you can consume the content, you don't need to register a credit card or anything, but you will be seeing those videos. We're also thinking about all kind of other models. A model we've launched last year is, for example, the model of a paid channel, where a content creator can produce content, but only users can watch the content that have a subscription for that channel. So we're flexible on the business models. History has shown the last couple of years that advertisement is likely the most promising avenue. That's why we've more invested in that than in others.
I think there's another question back there.
Bonjour, je vais poser ma question en français, elle sera traduite juste à mes côtés, merci. Il a été relevé par Andreas Rieser qui parlait du problème de la téléphonie mobile et de tout ce qui est broadcast, fournisseur internet. J'aimerais comprendre pourquoi ces gens ne sont pas présents sur le festival. Ce serait peut-être bien qu'ils aient leur mot à dire. J'ai regardé dans la liste de tous les professionnels, il n'y a pas une seule de ces personnes qui sont là. Et surtout, quand je vois la campagne Swisscom avec des disques de vinyle partout, des abonnements, de la facilité, et on ne les voit pas. Donc, quel est leur rôle là-dedans? Merci.
It's a long question. He noticed that Andreas Reiser talked about mobile phones and mobile...
Andreas, sorry, das got die Übersetzung.
And mobile communication, and he's wondering why there's no representative of Swisscom, for example, or any mobile network that could explain a little bit to us what is the future in this, basically in this area, and also especially since Swisscom has a big communication campaign. Well, basically, we're wondering why there's no representative here.
So maybe they just don't want to share the money.
I think it's more of a case that the structure of the music business is such that it goes through from musician to labels to shops, and telecoms at the moment aren't in this directly in this value chain. They usually work with companies like Spotify or Deezer. It is true that they are getting closer and closer to selling music, but at the moment they're just one small step away from that link.
Because it's too much grief. It's what you were saying. It's a nightmare dealing with the music companies.
Yeah, I mean, if I would think now that like also now
Swisscom,
like 500 mobile service providers in the whole world are also included and need to have a deal before you see that, it creates more friction. The question I think is a particularly important one. Let me give a different angle on an answer there. Is what we're seeing right now is what we call in the IT world is the mobile revolution. And you've kind of all noticed that, particularly in Switzerland, we have the highest smartphone penetration of any European country. So Switzerland is kind of leading that mobile penetration. But it's maybe the answer I should have given 5 years out, because I think in 5 years, music, if it doesn't work on your mobile phone, or however those devices will be called in 5 years, then it's practically non-existent. Because I think that's the devices that everything moves to.
I think that the other interesting thing is why Swisscom aren't here is I think the same reason as why the major labels aren't here is because they're frightened they'll get beaten up by everybody. you know, and they don't want to explain. They're so corporate. They just don't want to. No one will dare say anything in case it's not the party line. And it's the same with the major labels.
But they're not. Telecoms aren't contractually in the same position as us. We have contracts with musicians or with the retailers, and telecoms aren't at the moment anyway in that value chain.
They're delivering the music, and as I totally agree with what you're saying about that. They are going to become the key deliverer of music, and they are going to have the relationship with the customer. But you know, they don't want to get involved with our fight. All this shit that we've been going through. I mean, that's what they don't want to have anything to do with. Give them a price for music, and we'll better do a deal with Swisscom. But if they have to try and sort out all these squabbling people, not only within Switzerland but internationally, they've got thousands of squabbling people. You know, they don't want to know. They don't want to know, and that's our challenge. Can we find a way that we can deal with our retailers of the future?
I think there's one more question in the back
question,
there.
yes, please.
Hello, I've got another question to Oliver Heckmann. I still cannot believe how you give your answers. Google and YouTube are so powerful, and to give answers like the one you gave to the gamer question is just incredible to me. It's like the father talking to the little son. Son, you don't understand this. You're too young to understand this. You're talking to us as if we are like little dumb kids that don't get the point. Like, your answer to the whole gamer question was, oh, that's a way complicated procedure you don't understand, but we make deals, but you will never know what they are. And I don't want you to answer to that question. I just wanted to point that out right now. I just want you to know, like, you're in a very powerful position, and Peter said that before. You do deals with people who do illegal services for downloads. Because if I search for a song, I just type the song into Google, I will get like the third, or maybe not the first hit, but the third or fourth hit is always going to be MP3 Skull or Zippy Share or anything of that. You always get it for free. Like a 6-year-old can go on to Google and find a song for free, download it for free, pay nothing for it, and the artist won't get money for it. The record company, no one gets money for it. You have some deal behind, and I want you to answer that question now.
I'll still answer both questions because I can't let the first one stand. As you might know or might not know, kind of the exact discussions that are in those deal discussions are under an NDA, so I can't simply explain what the problem is. And because I can't kind of transparently lay out the discussions that have been happening in that case here for legal reasons, I've been saying, look, it's not that we're not willing to sign deals with collection societies, we're signing deals with collection societies all over the world. We are very willing to sign collection society deals. However, like, we're a business like any other business, so we won't sign a deal where we're losing so much money that we can't sustain the business. Nobody here would do that. So that's the first part. The second part, it has been a recurring topic here that Google would be... You said it's not a money question. That was your answer. Sorry, what? You first said it's not a money question. It's not? Okay, then let me, of course, if you're kind of willing to pay like $100 billion, then everything can be solved at one point in time with money. It's not a question of the unit price. Because you were kind of trying to try to seem it like seemingly it's just a price negotiation, and is it 0.1 cent or 0.3 cent or something like that. It's more complicated than that.
I maybe also have a question to Oliver, which could maybe also be interesting for all the people here. You said once, half a year ago at the podium at the Hallenstadion, you said that you're like paying out around $2,500 per 1 million streams in the States. Can you do a prediction what's going to be what you're paying out to the right holders in Switzerland? Do you know that already? Like 100,000 streams, what's the average of what you pay to the right holders?
I can't tell you the exact number simply because I simply have not looked that up.
Can I tell them what we get?
Yeah.
I think we get around 4,000, 460, around $4 per 1,000 cost per mil, per 1,000 views. $4. When we look at our statements, something like that. And that's an average over pre-roll, banner, inlay ads.
But that's just recording. But that's just for the recorded track.
That's correct. That's correct.
And on top of that, you would get some money.
Yeah, so I would like to know an average on 100,000 streams. What you pay to the right holders, average. Do you know that, or is there
I mean, that's the number I mentioned 6 months ago. I looked it up 6 months ago when I was talking there, so the number there was the...
But it's not going to be the same in Switzerland, or...
I suspect it's higher in Switzerland,
Okay.
given that kind of generally prices are higher here also for advertisement, but I haven't looked it up, so I can't...
It's a rev share deal, so the more advertisers there are in territory, the more that...
The nice thing of our model is we both sit in the same boat, because we both have the incentive of making that price go up, because then we make more money and you make more money.
Okay, well, I'm afraid our time is up. If there are any more questions, I'm sure our
Can I maybe on that, just
panelists
very
will-
quickly, there's a session, because there's probably more YouTube questions in the room. I'll be around after the panel, but also Dennis, colleague from London, a partner manager, he's giving 2 sessions this afternoon, I think at 4:30, at 5:30 in English and in German, where he can answer a lot of these YouTube questions as well.
Excellent. Peter, Andreas, Fabian, Shix, Oliver, thank you very much. And of course, thank you very much to you, the audience.